Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Very warm welcome to this Monday, 27th February 2023 morning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 6, Text 38. Before we discuss on this verse, let's sing Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajakacarya Shtodra Shati Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य शिला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। मथुरा धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Sarvam Shri Krishna Arpanamastu Krishne Matirastu Hare Krishna. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. So today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 38. yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ ya nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. Word by word. Yasya, those, avatara, incarnation, karmani, activities, gāyanti, chant in glorification, he, indeed, asmad-ādayaḥ, persons like us, na, do not, yam, whom, vidanti, know, tattvena, 100% as he is, tasmai, onto him, bhagavate, onto the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna, namaḥ, respectful obeisances. Translation: let us offer our respectful obeisances unto that Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose incarnations and activities are chanted by us for glorification, though he can hardly be known fully as he is. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. It is said that the transcendental name, form, quality, pastimes, paraphernalia, personality, etc., cannot possibly be perceived by the gross materialistic senses. But when the senses are purified by the process of hearing, chanting, remembering, and worshipping the Lord, the lotus feet of the holy deity, etc., the Lord reveals himself proportionately to the advancement of the quality of devotional service. Ye yatha mam prapadyante. One should not expect the Lord to be an order supplying agent who must be present before us as soon as we desire to see him. We must be ready to undergo the prescribed devotional duties, following the path shown by the predecessors in the disciplic succession from Brahma, Narada, and similar authorities. As the senses are progressively purified by bona fide devotional service, the Lord reveals his identity according to the spiritual advancement of the devotee. But one who is not in the line of devotional service can hardly perceive him simply by calculations and philosophical speculations. Such a hard worker can present a jugglery of words before an audience, but can never know the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his personal feature. The Lord has clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita that one can know him only by devotional service. No one can know the Lord by any puffed up material process of challenge. But the humble devotee can please the Lord by his earnest devotional activities. Thus, the Lord reveals himself proportionately before the devotee. Lord Brahma, therefore, offers his respectful obeisances as a bona fide spiritual master and advises us to follow the process of Shravana and Kirtana. Simply by this process, or simply by hearing and chanting the glories of the activities of the Lord's incarnation, one can certainly see himself, within himself, the identity of the Lord. We have already discussed this subject in volume 1 of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in connection with this verse. Tat shraddhadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyanti atmani chatmanam bhaktya shrutagrahitaya. Bhagavatam 1-12. The conclusion is that one cannot know the Supreme Personality of Godhead fully by any method, but he can be seen and felt partially by the devotional service process of hearing, chanting, etc. Before we discuss on this verse, let us offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Namashreshtham Manamapi Shachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Rupurim Mathurim Goshthavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Aho Radhika Madhavasham Prapso Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuda Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Adadandastranam dante idam yacha punah punah Shriman Rupa Padambojam Dhulisyam Janma Janmani. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 38. Yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto that Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose incarnations and activities are chanted by us for glorification, though he can hardly be fully known as he is. This is a verse being spoken by Lord Brahma to Narada Muni. Let's try and understand this line by line in terms of what the verse is saying. So the first line of the verse is yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi. It is mentioning about the incarnation and the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and his incarnations and his devotees also. So it is mentioned by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karmam cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvena tyaktva deham punarjanmam naiti mameti suvarjuna. It is very important to understand the divinity of the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Janma karmam cha me divyam. So his birth and his activities are divine, transcendental. If someone knows this in truth, evam yoveti tattvata, Krishna says that after giving up this body, tyaktva deham, punarjanmam naiti, such a person does not get another material body. Then what happens to such a person? Mameti Suarjuna. Krishna says that such a person comes back to me, back home, back to Godhead. So this is a very important point to understand. Yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi. How the Supreme Personality of Godhead is incarnating. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir-bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyam. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. As Krishna mentions that whenever there is discrepancy in execution of religious activities, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir-bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyam. So Krishna says that to re-establish the religious principles, the Supreme Personality of Godhead incarnates himself. Tadatmanam srijamyam. So this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead coming in his personal form. This is the most wonderful kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He mentions in the consequent verse, Paritranaya sadhunam. So this is the most important aspect of the incarnation of the Lord, that he comes to protect the saintly people. Paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam, and simultaneously to annihilate the miscreants. And dharma samsthapanarthaya, to re-establish religious principles, sambhavami yuge yuge. So this is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi, his incarnations and his activities are transcendental. There is, one can, sometimes in the impersonalist philosophy, the incarnation of the Lord is considered to be avajananti mam mudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananta mama bhuta maheshwaram. So it is mentioned in Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that unfortunately in the foolish state of existence, mudha, so Krishna mentions avajananti mam mudha. So in the ignorance, unfortunately, someone thinks that when Krishna is incarnating, manushim tanumashritam, so he is taking the material body. That is why the impersonalist philosophy is called Mayavada, because they are considering that everything is Maya, everything is the external energy of the Lord. But what is being missed there is that there is an internal energy of the Lord as well. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrita mudhoyam nabijanati mamibhya paramabhyam. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that his transcendental nature is not visible to everyone. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrita. So the yoga maya potency, or the internal energy of the Lord, is shielding him, shielding his divinity from the people who are not surrendered unto him. So the first step in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ye yatha mam prapadyante. One has to surrender unto the Lord. Prapadyante. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyam. Mama vartamanu vartante manushya partha sarvasha. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, whatever way one surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually saying that tam sataiva bhajamyam. So this is the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he is, so this bhajan, this it's wonderful statement, that statement that Krishna says there. The bhaja, or the engagement in the devotional service, is what is the natural activity of all the living entities. It is naturally there within the living entities. And similarly, the Lord is also, if we look at the story of Sudama coming to Sri Krishna. Sudama was a friend of Krishna from childhood, and somehow or other he becomes very poverty stricken, when he's at his elder age, and uh, he goes with the rice flakes to Krishna, and Krishna comes to receive him, and Krishna actually washes his feet. So this is the bhajamya of Krishna. Tam stateva bhajamya. This surrender of the devotee makes the Lord. Krishna actually says, "Na parayeham nirvadya samyujam swaswadhu krityam vibudhayushapiva ya ma bhajan durjara geha shrinkala samvrichyata diya pratiyatu sadhuna." So Krishna actually mentions this to the gopis, that, "Oh gopis, I can never repay you." This becomes the transcendental position of someone who has surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, 100%. That was the state of the gopis. They were constantly remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead and constantly singing his glories. So they even say in one of the verses, they say to Lord Brahma that, "Why did you create in such a way that we have to, the eyes blink? Because every time the eyes blink, I am not able to see the Lord for that particular microsecond." So this is the transcendental attachment of the gopis towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This is that's why Krishna says that, "I cannot repay you, na parayam." So it's the highest transcendental surrender. Ramya kachid upasana vrajavadu vargena kalpita. So this upasana, or this mode of worship that is done by the Vrajavadhus, Vrajavadhu Varga. They are the cowherd women of Vrindavan. So this is a transcendental position of the devotional service. And this is Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Jana. This is what is the gopis sing when they are in separation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are constantly engrossed in the nectarian pastimes of the Lord. Machchitta madgat prana bodhayanta parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. So Krishna has indirectly mentioned about the gopis in that particular verse there. So the gopis of Vrindavana, their minds are totally absorbed in the divine pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Machchitta, madgat prana. Their whole life is engaged in singing the glories of the Lord. They are always remembering and singing and hearing and chanting about the Lord. This is the transcendental position where one cannot even bear a moment of separation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is a transcendental position. So Machchitta Madgat Prana Bodhayanta Parasparam. When they're talking to each other, they are always talking about Krishna's divine activities. Kathayantascha Mam Nityam. Constantly they're talking about Krishna. Nityam, always. How they're talking? Tushyanti cha ramanti cha. They are totally satisfied and totally blissful when engaging in these divine discussions about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So this is the yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ. So persons like us. So here, who are the two people who are talking here? It is Narada Muni is asking the questions and Lord Brahma is answering the questions. So this is a way of acquiring knowledge. When one is hearing about the Lord and then asking pertinent questions. So this is tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, this pranipata is very important. Pranipata is surrendering onto the Lord. So surrendering onto the Lord and his sincere pure devotee, who is the guru. Tasmad gurum prapadyeta jignasu shreyam uttamam shabde parecha nishnatam brahmani upasamashrayam. So that particular verse is saying that the inquisitive person needs to surrender onto the spiritual master. So the qualification of the person who is surrendering, or the disciple, is one has to first surrender, prapadyeta, one has to be inquisitive, jignasu, shreya, one needs to know the ultimate benefit, and uttamam. So one actually wants to transcend the modes of material nature, udgata tamam. So these are the qualities of the disciple, that the disciple is inquisitive, jignasu, the disciple wants to know the ultimate benefit, what is ultimately beneficial for the disciple, shreya, and uttamam, the disciple wants to transcend the modes of material nature. Then what is the qualification of the guru then? Shabde parecha nishnatam, brahmani upasamashraya. The qualification of the guru is the guru has transcended all the material hearing and chanting and remembering. He has transcended. So he is on the spiritual hearing and chanting. Shabde parecha nishnatam. He's on a spiritual platform. And what is the guru's qualification? Brahmani upasamashraya. He has surrendered on to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the qualification of the guru. So upadyakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva. They are giving this transcendental divine knowledge because the spiritual master has directly experienced that particular knowledge. It is at the experiential level. It is not at the theoretical level. So the difference between theoretical and experiential level is that at the theoretical level, it is only based on an understanding. So one has understood that yes, this is the fact. But in an experiential level, one is actually situated brahmani upasamashrayam. So that one is situated in Brahman. So Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kamshati samah sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that is the qualification of the real guru, the real spiritual master. Fully understanding that they are eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because one is in the experiential state of that existence, one is prasannatma, fully blissful. It's not the so-called happiness and so-called distress. That is the duality of the material world, dvandva. So nirmana moha jitasanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvandvair vimukta sukadukka sangye gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat. This is mentioned about the qualification of someone who has surrendered 100% to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are dvandvair vimukta. They are liberated from the dualities of material nature. Nirmana moha. They do not have any pride or any attachment. Jita sanga dosha. They do not have attachment to sense gratification. Adhyatma nitya. They are constantly engaged in spiritual activities. Vinivritta kama. They are not. They don't have passion for material engagement. Dvandvair vimukta. So as we said, this is the free from dualities of material nature. Sukha dukkha sangye. This is another important quality, that one is equal in happiness and distress. One does not get perturbed in terms of some happy state coming in or some distress state coming in. Sukha dukkha sangye. Gacchantya modha padam avyayam tat. So this is the wise person who goes back home, back to Godhead. So this is the if we look at yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi, gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ, what we understand here from the first two lines is the importance of understanding the divinity of the transcendental incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and also his divine activities. And who understands this? People like Lord Brahma and Narada Muni, transcendental personalities who are so jnane prayase udapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharitam bhavadiyavartham sthane sthita shrutigata tanuvan manobhir ye prayase ajita jitopi asita istrirokyam. So this is mentioned by Brahmaji in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So this is it is mentioned that through word jugglery. So this is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada as well in the purport. Through word jugglery and through a lot of logical analysis, one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jnane prayase udapasya. Then how can one understand? Namanta eva. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead when one is in a humble state of mind. One knows that everything is Lord's. I am Lord's. Everyone else is Lord's. There is nothing that is not Lord's. So when one is fully cognizant of that fact, one knows that everything is Krishna's. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincham jagatyam jagat. Om purnamadaha purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnam evavashishyate. As it is mentioned, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is complete whole, and from him all the complete universes are emanating, and they are complete by themselves. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you look at how this whole nature has been created, it is self-sustaining. And it is interdependent. So look at this wonderful creation where we are exhaling carbon dioxide and inhaling oxygen, and the plants are inhaling carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen. So there is so much interdependence. The plants are giving us what we need, and we are giving the plants what they need. That is the Purnamada, Purnamidam. This is Purna. This is how it is Purna. And it is complete. The sustenance is automatically going on in terms of how it is created. Maya dhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Hetu nanena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, under my direction, this material energy is creating these varieties of living entities. Prakriti kriyate sacharacharam. Hetu nanena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. So this is this constantly changing, the constant change that happens from day to night. You've got a day cycle, a night cycle, then a week cycle, a month cycle, a year cycle, and within the year there are seasonal cycles. So everything is going on in a cyclical way, and this existence in this material universe, there is a cycle of birth and death. Again, there is a cycle. So this and this cycle of birth and death is what is keeping the conditioned living entities within this material world. It is this attachment. So when one is thinking that I am this body, immediately I got this attachment. The body would include the mind and intelligence and false ego. When we think about the body, the subtle elements are also included within it. Even though it is very difficult to understand the subtle elements because it is not seen, but we know it exists. Like the air we cannot see, but we know the air exists because we are breathing. If the air is sucked out of the atmosphere, one cannot stay even for 1 second. So this is this in the conditioned state of existence. This is it is said Brahma Pramada Vipralipsa Karana Patva. So it is mentioned that, and that's why in the conditioned state of existence any knowledge acquired is not the absolute knowledge. It is a relative knowledge, which is going through the filter of all the conditional existence that one has. So one is under illusion, Brahma, Pramada. So there is a being under the influence of illusion. One is unfortunately in a mad state of existence, vipralipsa, cheating propensity, and karana patva. One's senses are imperfect. So with these conditional existence, one cannot get absolute knowledge. So therefore, the absolute knowledge has to be received from someone who has actual knowledge, and that is the evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo vidu sakalene mahata yogo nashtah parantapa. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that is the system of parampara, getting the transcendental knowledge from generation to generation, being passed down by the divine transcendental people who have totally surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Saevayam mayati adya yoga prokta puratana bhakto sime sakha cheti rahasyam hi etaduttam. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, imam rajarshayo vidu. So this transcendental knowledge can be understood only by people who have got the qualities of Raja and Rishi, who have got the qualities of king and also the saint. So especially the saintly qualities. Otherwise, the inclination to hear about the Lord is unfortunately not present. That is the that is the quality of this age of Kali as well. So Srila Shukadeva Goswami mentions to Parikshit Maharaj, Kaler dosha nidhe rajan. That in this age of Kali, there are a lot of impurities. Prayan alpayusha sabhya kalavasmin yuge jana manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya hi upadhrata. That in this age of Kali, this overall duration that one lives is less. Prayan alpayusha sabhya kalavasmin yuge jana manda sumanda matayo. The intelligence is not that much developed to absorb the subtle transcendental concepts and the subtle transcendental sound vibrations, because intelligence is totally occupied with increasing the sense gratification, unfortunately. So senses become the supreme instead of the Supreme Personality of Godhead remaining the supreme. The senses become the supreme, and when the senses are supreme and the mind is supreme, it is going in the chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavad dridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayuriva sudushkaram. As Arjuna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, he says to Krishna that, oh Krishna, this mind is really very it does not stay at one place. It's constantly moving from one place to another. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. It is obstinate, balavad dridam. It is determined to not come under control. And if I think of controlling it, it feels as if it is like controlling the wind. Tasyaham nigraham manye vayuriva sudushkaram. Even difficult than controlling the wind. So Krishna says that asamshaya mahabaho manodur nigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagrahya. Krishna accepts what Arjuna is saying, that undoubtedly Arjuna, yes, this mind is very difficult to control. Manodurri nigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagrahya. But through practice and through renunciation, the mind can be controlled. And so what is this practice? This practice is gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ. That is a practice. As it is mentioned in the first two lines of this verse, yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ. That is a practice. When one is remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and chanting his transcendental names and his transcendental activities. So that is the abhyasa. That is the practice. And when that practice is taking place, automatically there is vairagya. There is renunciation. Vasudeve bhagavati bhakti yoga prayojita janeti ashu vairagyam jnanam chayad ahetukam. It is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that when one is engaged in the loving devotional service of Vasudeva, the son of Vasudeva, Sri Krishna, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Janayati Ashu Vairagyam. This renunciation is immediately attained, very soon. Jnanam chayad ahetukam, and one gets the transcendental knowledge as well. So this is the transcendental position of involving in loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Automatically, one is getting the byproducts, which is the renunciation and transcendental knowledge. There is other way where one might go towards renunciation separately or towards transcendental knowledge separately. But that is, Krishna actually mentions, klesho adhikaras tesham, avyaktasakta chetasam, avyakto hi gatir dukham dehavat viravapyate. That it is very difficult to pursue knowledge and renunciation separately through the impersonal philosophy. Even one pursues that, one might reach the parampadam patanti yada, anadrita yushmadangraya. So it is mentioned, ye anya aravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvai asta bhavad avishuddha buddhaya aruya krichena parampadam tata patanti yada, anadrita yushmadangraya. So it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, if someone is trying to attain liberation without surrendering onto the lotus feet of the Lord, one might actually get the semblance of liberation, but then one will fall down. Why? Because one did not respect the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anadrita Yushmadangraya. That is the transcendental position of involving in devotional service. It is immediate. It is the result is Ashu Vairagyam. So as soon, very soon. So this is Srila Prabhupada actually mentions in the conclusion as well. Tat Shraddha Dhana Munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pashyanti Atmani Chatmanam Bhaktya Shruta Grahitaya. So this is the transcendental position where a person who has got faith, because that is very important. It is the foundation of spirituality, foundation of involving in Krishna consciousness. Shraddhavan Janahaya Bhakti Adhikari Kanishta Madhyama Uttama Shraddha Anusari. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Karile Sudhrida Nishchay Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hai. This is mentioned. So it is the Shraddhavan Labate Jnanam Tatparat Samyati Indriya Jnanam Labdva Param Shantim Sthanam Prapsasi Shashvatam. So this is Achirena Adhigachati. So when one is in that state of total surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that surrender is caused by having faith. And where does the faith come from? Faith is ingrained in all the living entities. It is an eternally, it is not something that is coming from outside. It is already there, but it is covered. So Srila Prabhupada gives the example of someone suffering from jaundice who does not know that the taste of sugar is sweet. Because of jaundice, everything tastes bitter. But Srila Prabhupada gives the example that in order to cure jaundice, one of the cure that is given is one should keep eating the sweet until the original taste of sweet can be experienced, sweetness can be experienced. So similarly, the faith is already there. How can it be revived when one is in touch with the people who have faith? And one is constantly remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So some way or the other, if someone is hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately there is cleansing taking place. Sanketya parihasam va sthoba helanam eva va vaikuntha nama grahanam asheshaga haram vidhu. So it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that somewhere or the other, if one is hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one is even if sometimes someone is making fun For example, if the devotees are chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the street, and someone is making fun, parihasam, even though they are making fun, they do not realize that they are actually getting cleansed as well. So this is the transcendental position of getting in touch with the sound vibrations of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, of all the activities that are related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sanketya parihasamba sthoba helanam eva Vaikuntha nama grahanam asheshagaharam vidu. So one can have lots and lots of covering and lots of dirt, but if somehow or other one is hearing the transcendental sound vibrations, that is getting cleansed. And then once all the dirt gets cleansed, one automatically knows who one is. Therefore, this path of spirituality is called self-realization. Why is it called self-realization? Because the self is already there. If the self was not there, no one would exist. It is the self that is the spirit soul, which is the foundation of all the experiences that we experience. But one of the interesting thing about the spirit soul is that it by itself is not participating in all these experiences. It is just providing that pure consciousness to all the living entities. So who is actually involved in these experiences? It is a false ego. The false ego is the platform which is saying that I am this individual. Ahankara vimudhatma karta hamiti manyate. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. Ahankara vimudhatma karta hamiti manyate. So actually all the work is being done by the modes of material nature. So in the mode of goodness, one is engaged in discussing transcendental topics. In the mode of passion, one is engaged in accumulating material things. And then in the mode of passion, one is totally lazy and indolent. So these modes are constantly working on the false ego and on the mind intelligence and false ego. The modes are dictating. But when one knows that one is actually the self, Indriyani parani ahur indriyabhya paramana yo manasastu paro buddhe yo buddhe paratastu sa. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, he says that undoubtedly, Arjuna, these senses are very strong. But stronger than the senses is mind. Stronger than the mind is intelligence. And stronger than the intelligence is the real consciousness. Because it is a spirit soul, and the symptom of the spirit soul is consciousness. It's a spirit soul that is a cause of everything else that happens. And who is the cause of the spirit soul? It is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because Krishna says, Mama eva amsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanātana. That all the living entities are my eternal part and parcels. So therefore, Krishna is sarva karana karanam. If we think that it is the spirit soul which is the karana, which is the cause of all the things that are happening to us, because it is, if the spirit soul was not there, there is no consciousness. If the consciousness is not there, the body is dead. The body is dead, nothing happens. Everything gets mixed with the ingredients. The earth part of the body becomes earth, water parts become water, fire part become fire, the air part will become air, and the space part will become space. So the disintegration of the body will take place when the spirit soul is not present. So this is so if you think that the spirit soul is the karana, then the karana of that karana, or the cause of that cause, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sarva karana karana. So the cause of all causes. This is the understanding from the first two lines. And then the next two lines, Nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. Let us understand that. Nayam vidanti tattvena. So Krishna actually mentions that Vedaham samatitani Vartamani cha Arjuna, Bhavishyani cha Bhutani, Mam tu Vedana Kaschana. So Krishna mentions that he knows past, present, and future. He knows everything. But rarely someone knows him. Mam tu Vedana Kaschana. So this is Aham Madir hi Devanam, Maharshinam cha Sarvasha. So Name Vidu Suragana, Prabhavana Maharshaya. Aham Madir hi Devanam, Maharshinam cha Sarvasha. So Krishna mentions that even the great demigods, they don't know me. So we actually see Brahmaji is saying this verse, and we see in the Brahma Vimohana Leela, Krishna's pastimes, where Lord Brahma, suddenly he thinks that Krishna is a small child. He is not a Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he tries to test whether Krishna is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, that the first entity who came from the navel, the lotus coming from the navel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Brahmaji was there, right, sitting on the lotus. So he's so he is Padmanabham. And so the Padmanabha, from the navel of the Mahavishnu, this Padma or the lotus is coming, and in that lotus, Brahmaji is there. So he's the first person who is created by the Lord, and he himself gets confused that is Krishna actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, Krishna says, Name Vidu Suragana. We see Indra as well. Indra brings in the Samvartaka cloud, and then Krishna lifts the Govardhana hill with the small finger of his left hand. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So all these great demigods like Brahma, Indra, they also are bewildered by the transcendental position of Krishna. So that is why it is Nayam Vidanti tattvena. It is very difficult to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead fully. But Krishna actually says that when one is surrendered, tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yogina ananya cheta satatam yo mam smarati nityasha tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yogina. Krishna says that if someone is constantly absorbed in thinking about me, ananya cheta, constant, ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nithyabhyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyam. So when one is constantly remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then tasyaham sulabha partha. So Krishna says that for such a person I am easily available. Why? Because nitya yuktasya yogina. Because this person has been constantly endeavoring to remember me. So because of that, I'm easily available to such a person. That is the this is what is when we look at Nayam Vidanti tattvena, the third line of this verse, one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead fully. So when we think about Brahma's verse, which says that sthane sthita shrutigata tanuvan manobhir ye prayase ajita jitopi asita istrilokya. So shrutigata tanuvan manobhir, that is the most important thing. If one somehow or other one keeps on hearing about the Lord, shrutigata, how and through what? Tanuvan manobhir, through the body, through the speech, and through the mind. Somehow or other, if one is remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then Krishna, who is unconquerable, Ajita, becomes conquered. Jitopi asita istrilokya. So he is unconquerable within the whole three worlds. That is Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he becomes conquered. This is the transcendental position of Krishna. That he is totally. So as we said, ye yatha mam prapadyante tam tataiva bhajamiham. So if someone has surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna personally takes care of such a surrendered person. This is the wonderful transcendental position of devotional service. Bhaktya tu ananya shakya ahameva vidho Arjuna. Gyatam drishtam cha tattvena praveshtam cha parantapa. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that to know him, ahameva vidho Arjuna. Bhaktya tu ananya shakya. So when the devotional service is performed without any stop, that is when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known. Then gyatam drishtam cha tattvena praveshtam cha parantapa. One can not only know Krishna, one can see Krishna, drishtam, in truth, tattvena, and praveshtam. One can actually enter into the kingdom of God. This is the transcendental realm of Goloka Vrindavana. One can actually enter there. So bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tatvata tato mam tatato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. So na sadhyati mam yogo na sankhya dharma uddhava na swadhyaya tapastyago yato bhaktir mamorjita. Krishna mentions to Uddhava that you cannot know me by yoga, nor through sankhya, nor through execution of religious principles, nor through self-study, nor through tapa, nor through austerity, nor through renunciation. But how can Krishna be known? Yato bhaktir mamorjita. Through devotional service. And what is devotional service? Devotional service is sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchyate. That is given by Sri Narada Muni himself, who is hearing these words from Brahmaji. So Narada Muni says that what is the definition of bhakti? The first step in loving devotional service to Krishna is one has to give up all designations. Sarva upadhi vinirmuktam. The designation that immediately the designation when one is born is I am the child of so and so. I am this person of this nation. I am a person of this region. All these are designations coming in. And then when what grows, one is putting on other designations. When the educational qualifications, all these designations, if one has to, when one gives up, then one knows one's original spirit soul position, which is free from all designations. The only designation of the spirit soul is Jivera Swarupaya Krishnera Nityadas. Krishnasya tatastha shakti bheda bheda prakash suryansha yatha agni jwala chaya Krishnera swabhavika tina prakash shakti haya. So this is the only designation of all the living entities. They are eternal part and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, there is no other designation. All the other designations happen in the conditioned state of existence. And when one is engaged in the discussion like this, yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. Let us offer our respectful obeisances onto that Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose incarnations and activities are chanted by us for glorification, though he can hardly be fully known as he is. So when we discuss these verses in association of devotees, then we understand that we are eternally in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At no point in time are we separate from the Lord. That separation is caused because one identifies oneself with the designations. So immediately when we stop identifying ourselves with all these designations, we will know that the only designation that exists is that I am eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I am an eternal servant of the Lord, and the Lord has got full control over me. Nimitta matram bhava savyasachi. As Krishna mentions to Arjuna, you become my instrument, to Arjuna. So actually, everyone is an instrument of the Lord. But because of the material covering, one does not see that one is an instrument. Immediately when these coverings, designations are removed, one knows that I am an instrument of the Lord, and the Lord can use me as he wants. That is the conclusion of this verse. Yasyāvatāra-karmāṇi gāyanti asmad-ādayaḥ nayam vidanti tattvena tasmai bhagavate namaḥ. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu Krishne Materastu Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.